Hey everyone, welcome to Operations, the show where we look under the hood of companies in hypergrowth. My name is Sean Lane. When this show first started back in 2018, the resources available for operators were slim. I originally didn't even want to make this show about ops because I was skeptical that anyone would care. Fast forward to 2025, and the resources around RevOps have exploded. Communities, newsletters, conferences, books. Not to mention all the products that now explicitly target RevOps buyers. It's a great time to be in operations. And one of my favorite things about being in ops is how generous other operators are when it comes to sharing their learnings and their experiences. So, what happens when you get 14,000 of them together in a single community? Talk about compelling, right? Someone who knows exactly what that's like is our guest today, Matt Volm. Matt is the CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op, a community for, you guessed it, RevOps folks. Matt is a former operator himself, and he started a software company in 2020 called Funnel IQ that eventually transformed into what RevOps Co-op, the community, is today. They've got content, resources, events, and one of the most active Slack orgs you've ever seen. In our conversation, Matt and I talk about how he brought his product development mindset from his software company to his community. We cover the tricky shift from driving engagement to moderating engagement, and what he's noticing about more and more of his new members joining from outside of tech. To start, though, with so many different types of communities and forums out there, I wanted to learn from Matt how he and his team landed on the format for RevOps Co-op's community as it exists today.
I'll say, like all things, where we are now is certainly not where we thought we'd be when we started. So while what we have now is RevOps Co-op, the community of 14,000 plus folks from kind of all across the globe who are passionate about revenue operations, we actually started 4+ years ago as a software company. So previously, before this, I was the VP of business operations at this company called Ally.io, which was building OKR software. They went on to get acquired by Microsoft. But when I was there, I was responsible for all of BizOps, which included revenue operations. And so I saw this problem around data and analytics and kind of providing revenue operators with just tools to be able to kind of measure their end-to-end performance across the entire go-to-market engine. And so went out, raised some money, pre-seed and seed for this kind of product idea about building a go-to-market analytics tool that was called Funnel IQ. And so we started building that product, right? And one of the things we did early on, because actually one of our angel investors was kind of in the community space, he was like, hey, RevOps is this new thing, this new function. He's like, it's probably an opportunity to build a community in this space as part of your own go-to-market efforts for Funnel IQ. And so I was like, yeah, that all sounds good, but like, what's a community, right? Like, what does that even mean? And so we decided for us that meant we were going to start with a Slack group and a newsletter. And we started with those two things because most people in revenue operations, work in a B2B environment where you're using a tool like Slack already. So there wasn't a big hurdle there. And everyone, who works has a work email, right? So, we'll send a newsletter to their inbox. So that was how we got started as, hey, we're going to start RevOps Co-op as a separately branded community that'll be affiliated with Funnel IQ, our software startup. We were doing it so that we could raise awareness of the Funnel IQ product while also delivering value to people in RevOps. So everyone kind of wins. And then, fast forward, right? And in typical startup fashion, we pivoted a bunch, iterated a bunch on our software product idea, but that just never had product market fit. So we were like, all right, let's sunset or shut down the software product and just focus on the community. And that was about 2.5 years ago that we made that switch. So that's kind of how we got started, and I guess how we landed on, or at least ended up where we are today.
And once you kind of went all in on the community, right? there's, I feel like, a bunch of different platforms now and different ways you can kind of facilitate these communities. And it seems like you all have largely stayed with Slack as kind of the primary mode of engagement, at least digital engagement. I know you're doing some in-person stuff now too. Like, talk to me about that. How did you decide, like, this is the best forum, this is the best medium for this particular audience?
Yeah. So similar to, I mean, I guess we approach, I guess, everything in the community similar to, what you would do if you went out and were building a software product. I mean, that's essentially what we have is our community is a product, right, that we're delivering to our members. And so, like we talked a little bit about, Slack as a place where people can engage daily, ask questions, get answers, kind of talk with their peers. The reason why we started there and chose that was, again, because we were like, hey, everyone, most people use this tool already for their jobs. So I'm not asking you to download another thing. I'm not asking you to learn a new platform, right? It's something you've already got on your desktop or your phone. And then again, with the newsletter, it was like, everyone's got an inbox. We'll give you some, interesting, relevant content, right, on a regular basis. But like all things, we also knew that, hey, like Slack's not for everybody, right? Like some people really like to engage and like sift through the messages that are there and participate in those conversations. And other people are just straight up like, I don't want to participate in another Slack group. And that is fine. Like for us, we look at all those individual elements, whether it's our Slack group, our newsletter, our digital events, our courses, our recorded product demos, right? Like we've got all this stuff. Some of it's free, some of it's paid. We've got in-person events, right? Like we look at all this stuff as like a collection of things that we can serve up to our members. And we don't expect everyone to participate in 100% of those things, right? Some people, like I said, don't want to do Slack, but maybe they really crave the in-person kind of get-togethers. Other people, right? We're talking about people in RevOps. Some people might just be straight up like introverts, and they're not like going to be the social butterflies, right? That want to go around and like engage with people in person, but maybe they do want to like attend digital events and engage in the Slack group because that's just an easier way for them to participate. So that's kind of how we've been approaching things from the very beginning. And again, while it might sound obvious of just like listening to our members about the things that they want and what they want more of and less of, and just offering more programs and alternatives that way.
Even though Matt's initial software startup, Funnel IQ, didn't work out, he's brought the same product development mentality that you'd have in a software company to his community. At the time we recorded, RevOps Co-op had 14,000 members strong and growing. And Matt and his team continue to look for new ways to support those 14,000 people. And of course, not every person learns the same way or wants to consume information the same way. And if you look back to before Matt even started the community, there weren't nearly as many resources for operators to learn from as there are today. So as we sit here in 2025, there are so many to pick from. So I wanted to know how Matt thinks about RevOps Co-op's unique way of contributing to the RevOps community as more and more alternatives emerge.
For us, it's always been really just about, I guess, staying true to ourselves, right? So like, even our like tagline, right? Like from the very beginning has really remained the same. Like for us, it's been, an all about RevOps, right? Like that's what we do. So like for us, if you don't necessarily need a job title in revenue operations to be a member of our community. Like you could be an SDR, an AE who wants to get into RevOps. You could be a recruiter who recruits a lot in RevOps, right? Like you could be a marketing person or sales leader who maybe doesn't have an ops person supporting them yet and be a member of our community. But right, like if you join our community and you're not into revenue operations, like you're probably going to get bored pretty quickly. So one is just keeping the narrow, I'll say, like focus on the topic and the subject matter, while it can seem, call it appealing, right? To be like, oh, well, let's go broader with this, right? Like let's start to do like all of sales and then like all of marketing and like all of customer success, right? And like now what you end up doing is getting really, really broad and really wide, but really shallow. And so for us, staying narrow and going deep and focus on RevOps is one of those things. And then I guess the second element of kind of staying true to ourselves and just how we look at and I guess see ourselves as different is like just having fun along the way. And again, like this might seem obvious, and I don't know, probably some people are listening and like rolling their eyes a little bit, but like I'm a big believer in, like the journey is your reward, right? Like, regardless of where you end up, whether, there's a successful outcome or not in anything, right? Whether it's a job or a company you started or anything, like doesn't matter. Like what matters is like what you do, what you learn, and like the experiences that you have along the way. Those are the things that you'll remember. And so for us, like what I mean by like just having fun and stuff is like we're sarcastic, we're kind of snarky, right? Like if you get an email from us, like every email opens up with like some sort of like corny dad joke. We have a conference called RevOps AF, right? Like, the AF does stand for like what you think it stands for. Like things like that, right? Like we have a merch store with like t-shirts that, say things like, I would agree with you, but then we both be wrong. Or I work in RevOps, I don't know what I do either. Or we just rolled out some that are like, sandboxes are for kids. I work in production. Just like stuff like that. That's like,
Nice.
it's fun, right? So like that's kind of embedded in all the things that we do. So like we're not going to be the like stuffy kind of corporate-y, type of place, right? Like we still have plenty of opportunities to learn, for people to get better, right? Like the Slack group, we have courses, we do all these, digital events, all these in-person events. But again, like fun is peppered into all the stuff that we do. So those are really the two things I look at that, kind of keep us, unique and really have been our focus from the very beginning.
As RevOps leaders, our roles require juggling marketing forms, enrichment, and complex lead routing. The entire inner workings of the go-to-market falls on our shoulders. But what if there was an easier way? That's why I'm excited to announce our new sponsor, Default. Imagine this: a lead submits a form on your website. Instantly, Default enriches the contact, intelligently routes different sized companies to different paths, schedules meetings, and logs everything in HubSpot or Salesforce. All automated, all in real time, and perhaps most importantly, all in one place. Visit default.com/Sean Lane today, or click the link in the show notes to learn more and revolutionize your RevOps today. Okay, back to Matt. Before the break, Matt was explaining the origin story behind his community, RevOps Co-op, and how it serves operators who are looking to better themselves. Matt has worked in RevOps himself, and now through RevOps Co-op, he has probably interacted with more operators than most people do in their entire career. He talks to folks like you and me, the audience for this show, every single day. So I wanted to know, what has he learned about this unique group of people?
So one, like over the last couple of years, the interesting thing I've seen like collectively is that RevOps is now growing globally, right? So started, not surprisingly, with, a lot of like US based practitioners and companies, but we now have like, I think 45 plus countries represented across our member base. So very, like huge global presence, and like large, like interesting pockets in places like Brazil, right? And even like Australia and like London. So global growth has been interesting. The other thing is a lot of growth outside of software and technology companies. So companies outside of tech that are adopting revenue operations. Actually, as our community has grown, the percentage of members working in software technology has gone down, which means that more new people are joining the community from outside of tech, places like retail, manufacturing, financial services. And then in terms of, like the folks that are in RevOps, the interesting thing is, right, no one goes to college to get a degree in revenue operations, right? Like, it's not like finance or accounting in that sense, right? So everyone has, I'll say, like definitely like a unique background or kind of story. But I guess the main threads that I've seen in terms of how people kind of land in their ops role is, one, they've been on an actual sales, marketing, or like CS team as you'll call it like the person executing, right? So like a marketing manager or an SDR, an AE, or a CSM, but they're the one that's like, more like I don't know, call it like process focused, technology focused, right? Like they're the person who, like when they were on the team, right, was always interested in like how they can leverage technology to better do their job. They might be the one person who would actually like read your process documentation that you would put out there, right? So like they land into kind of a RevOps job from one of those like kind of frontline sort of positions. And then the other, call it angle, or I guess place, is folks actually coming from more of like, I'll say like the finance or analytics side of things. So actually understanding, right, financial outcomes, how those look on a financial statement, but they're in a unique position then for actually being able to understand the activity and the inputs, right, the things that businesses actually do to drive those financial outcomes. And it's not for every person that's in, kind of the finance space, but understanding the financial background and then having, again, like the ops, sort of bent. Those are, I guess, like the two, call it common threads that I've seen, at least in terms of how people kind of navigate the very, kind of twisting and turning career path, if you will, to get into kind of RevOps.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that jumps out at me when I kind of jump between the different channels in your community too is just like the sheer generosity of the people that are in these groups, right? And I think, I'm sure this is probably true of other functions too, but the one that I have direct exposure to is ops people. And like, you cannot ask a question without getting 2 or 3 like really thoughtful answers, usually more than that, to that question. Like, that doesn't happen by accident. Certainly it could be, by nature of these folks, they're I think we as operators are enablers by nature, and we, try and teach people and help people as a core part of our job. But like, you could still have a group of these folks and that you could throw stuff into the abyss and then you would never hear anything back. Like, how do you kind of encourage and kind of set up an environment where that is something that is clearly just happening naturally? I imagine it's much easier now with 14,000 people, but I would imagine at the beginning that took a little bit more of concerted effort in order to make sure that that was the experience people had. That if I, even if I don't come to the community every day, if I know that I have a question, I can turn to this and say, at least I know I'm going to get some sort of thoughtful help when I do show up.
Yeah. So yeah, it was, I think there was a point at the beginning, and this is probably true in any community, but where when you first start, right, you want people to get into your, call it like our Slack group, right, to engage, and you need to help drive the engagement and drive some of those things that you mentioned, right? You want to make sure, like, if people ask a question, that they actually get answers. You want to make sure if someone introduces themselves, that people actually respond and you welcome them. And so those are a lot of things that you do intentionally at the beginning, right? You need to just like every day spend time doing those things. There's no way around it. Like, you and your team need to do that. And then at some point you reach a tipping point, and it's not necessarily based on like the size of your community, but there's all of a sudden a shift that starts to happen where you have at least enough like active or engaged or call it like helpful people in that space, then now those things start to happen naturally and organically. But that doesn't mean that your work ends. Then your work shifts from trying to drive the engagement to now moderating the engagement that's there. And the main thing with that is, like in all places, right? Like, you're just naturally going to have some like bad actors, right? And so for us, we try to be really clear on like, hey, these are the community guidelines. If you're participating in our Slack group, like, you got to follow these rules, right? Like, no soliciting, no spamming, no DMing, no using what you learn here and like, like sending LinkedIn DMs or stuff like that. And then we make people aware of that every week, right? We put a post in our announcements channel to let people know, like, these are the rules, these are the community guidelines, encourage people to report violators, and then like we kick people out. And we've kicked a lot of people out before for breaking the rules multiple times. We have a lot of people that report violations. We just try to make it like a safe space to be able to do that, so that the conversations that happen there are in fact ones that are going to be relevant and valuable to you, and you don't need to sift through a whole lot of like crap in order to get to the stuff that actually matters. And trust me, like you'd be amazed at some of the stuff that like people try to like when you give them like the opportunity to like join a Slack group with, like tens of thousands of people in it. Like I've seen some people try some crazy things.
The shift from driving engagement to moderating engagement is an interesting one. Matt and his team face new challenges, and instances of product pitches and prospecting in these communities is only going to increase as the buying power of RevOps folks also increases. And look, as someone who provides consulting services, I get it. Knowing where your audience spends their time is a huge part of selling into your ICP. And there are plenty of RevOps consultants in these communities too, not just vendors who will sell to RevOps personas. So if you're in there, you need to give, and not sell in these types of forums. Matt told me that showcasing your expertise is really the best way to earn people's trust. Another thing that I appreciate about Matt and the content that the RevOps Co-op's team puts out is how practical and useful it is. I actually read their newsletter. That's rare. And so as a former practitioner himself, Matt now has thousands of other practitioners who look to him and his team for advice. I wanted to know what that's like and where Matt turns to now for his own learning and content.
I guess the short answer is it's weird for sure. But yeah, to your point, like that's we talked about it before, right? No one goes to school to get a degree in revenue operations. Right? So everyone's really just learning on the job and learning as they go. And so, that includes all of us, right? So we, when it comes to kind of putting together content, like we know from ourselves, right, that the things that we want and that we appreciate are going to be, the tactical, detailed, like here's how you do a thing, sort of content, not the high level, kind of fluffier framework sort of stuff. So one with that in mind, right, like that's kind of where we start from when we create any of the content, knowing just what's important to our members and the people that'll be on the receiving end. And then because like us and the people that do a lot of our writing have, they've been in RevOps before, they've been practitioners, right? So by paying attention by knowing what our members want in terms of being tactical and detailed, by having access to all those conversations that we do in our Slack group and just talking to these people every single day, we know topics and things that are going to be important and relevant. And then by obviously like living and breathing this ourselves over the past how many years, we're able to turn that into content and stuff that's relevant. And we leverage not only our members for that, right? Like we've talked about before, and we have the Slack group, but we also do interviews and stuff with them on a regular basis. But we also leverage our partners for a lot of that too, right? Like folks like QuotaPath, who are experts in compensation and all things compensation and commissions, right? Or, like Boost Up on the forecasting side, right? Like there's a lot of partners that have expertise in specific areas or categories. So we leverage them for a lot of the category specific stuff as well. But that's kind of how we approach all the content stuff and the content creation side of what we do.
And what are you excited for next in that area? Like, what are you excited for around what's coming next, both for RevOps folks and the work that they do, but also for the community?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that with RevOps, I guess in general, the field or the function that has me excited or looking forward to the future is I think we're kind of, we're past the first couple of years of truly like trying to figure things out. And I think we're getting to a place now where we're starting to get some structure and consistency around the role, what it means, what it should be, right? Kind of do's, don'ts, things like that. Don't get me wrong, still have a long way to go with that, but we've gotten through some of those initial growing pains. And so as I look to the near future, the thing that, I'm excited about is just seeing the role kind of continue to get elevated see like, how how RevOps is positioned and starts to participate on executive teams and in the C-suite. And I think like elevating the role or the profession, that's the biggest thing that has me looking forward to seeing how our members and folks are going to kind of elevate themselves. And then with the community and some of the other things, I guess, we talked a little bit about the in-person side, but one, even just talking about like in-person events, like hard to believe that it wasn't that long ago that we were all going through COVID and we were, wiping our groceries down when they got delivered and we're like go outside. Right. And, we like wouldn't shake hands and, like all that stuff, right? Like that seems like such a distant thing of the past. But I guess like the reason why I bring up in person is because I think even with a lot of the recent advancements in AI, it's making all the digital things that you either do or have access to a lot noisier. And so, but like an in-person event, right? Like, at least inherently, like, AI is not going to, go and muck that stuff up. So I think in-person events are really good for that reason. And like, whether it's like the conference, like we're doing the RevOps AF conference, we do a lot of these like smaller local events in places like Chicago, New York, Austin, San Francisco, kind of all over the place. So the in-person kind of stuff has me excited as well.
Before we go, at the end of each show, we're going to ask each guest the same lightning round of questions. Ready? Here we go. Best book you've read in the last 6 months?
I haven't read a book in the last 6 months.
Podcast, TV show, magazine?
I am, so I guess this might date me a little bit, but I'm a big fan of Friends, the sitcom. And I will like just rewatch that nonstop. I mean, I've got all the DVDs still, like all that stuff. So yeah.
Nice. All right. Favorite part about working in ops?
I like a solid process, right? Like even like in my personal life, right? Like, keep a like pretty rigid, like calendar, right? I have templated steps that I walk through to do things, whether it's like to get my kids out the door in the morning, to get them to soccer practice, to drive to the gym, right? Like that's just like how my mind works. So I'm a sucker for a good process and a good template.
Flip side, least favorite part about working in ops?
No one knows what you actually do.
Fair enough. Someone who impacted you getting to the job you have today?
I'll say this guy, William Su, who is he's a partner at Mucker Capital. And he was the first check into my very first startup when I was a first-time founder back in 2017. And I had never started a company before. I had no business starting a company. I knew nobody in venture capital, but I had an idea and a pitch deck, and I started sending a bunch of cold emails, and he responded, and he was like the first guy that was willing to actually take a chance on me. And he was the first check into Funnel IQ. Even though I lost all his money the first time around, we still talk on a monthly basis. So he's the guy who's probably impacted my professional career the most.
That's awesome. All right, last one. One piece of advice for people who want to have your job someday.
Give yourself permission to change your mind and try a lot of different things. So I think the trap that we all kind of fall into, and I was guilty of this early on in my career as well, is thinking that like you've got this thing that you want to do in your head, right? You're like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be that, right? I want to be a police officer. I want to be a public accountant. I want to be a lawyer, right? And then you get there and you're like, actually, this isn't like that great, but like I thought I really wanted to do it. And then you kind of feel stuck, right? And you feel like either like, well, I said I really wanted to do it. Now I'm too embarrassed to admit that it's not that great. What would I actually want to do, right? Like all these things start to swirl. Like just get rid of that. Like give yourself permission to change your mind, right? Like a job is, nothing more than that. It's a job. So if you think you want to, like go out and start a company, like go out and start a company, you can do it, right? Like I just told you the story about kind of how I did it, right? You just got to try and be kind of stubborn and put up with failure a lot. If you think you want to be a lawyer or an accountant, anything else, like go out and like try, experience those things, right? And like learn from them. Maybe you learn that you love it and that's what you want to do with the rest of your life. Maybe you learn that you don't and you want to move on. But collectively, those experiences, those will be super valuable. So yeah, if you want to be a CEO or, a founder of a company, you can do it, guaranteed. Like you don't need anything more than like an idea and basically some willpower. Just be prepared to fall flat on your face multiple times every single day. You'll get used to failing, and then you'll just need to literally do that every single day for essentially the rest of your life. And that's what it's like to be a founder.
Thanks so much to Matt for joining us on this week's episode of Operations. If you like what you heard from Matt, make sure you are subscribed to our show so you get a new episode in your feed every other Friday. Also, if you learned something from Matt or from any of our guests, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. It really helps other folks to find the show. All right, that's going to do it for me. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.